Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I would call it a garden variety AFC North victory for the Ravens on Sunday over the Cincinnati Bengals. It might have, could have, should have, would have been a little easier, certainly with the time of possession, Luke Jones, but it felt at times, especially as it plodded along at the end, like an 8-8 team beating a 2-14 team or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's be clear about this. It was going to be really difficult to earn style points when you're playing a team that hasn't won a game all year. I mean, it's just the reality. It's just like, we talked about it with Miami and the Dolphins 0-6 later. We were right about the fact that Miami was really bad. So
God, the Redskins. You lost to the Redskins. Wow.
Yeah. Although they did battle back. But my point is, when you're playing a team like that, short of beating them by 40 points, it's going to be tough to really earn too many style points. And when you look at the game, it really came down to, in my mind, two plays that made that much closer than it needed to be, quite frankly. The kick return for the touchdown to start the game. Right off the bat, you're down 7-0. And then the Mark Andrews hurdle fumble. You take those two plays away, that's probably a game where the Ravens win going away. Maybe not by 40 points, but certainly more comfortable than it ended up being.
Not flopping on a ball with a minute and a half left to go, where it looked like for a second you're like, oh my God, they've got the ball. It's a 6-point game. Shouldn't have been that close, right?
Yeah, and I don't think this is a game, and probably there are some similarities with this one and the Week 2 win over Arizona, where it was close, but it never truly felt like it was in grave danger. Now, Arizona had the ball, with it being a one-score game, and certainly the Bengals, to their credit, I suppose, they finally put together a touchdown drive with their offense at the very end of the game. Garbage time, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it was kind of clear that the Ravens were in control. It felt like that, but it wasn't that way from a score standpoint. So, again,
as I tweeted, it was over, but it was never done, kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah. I mean, you never really felt panicked. I don't think fans were panicked. I mean, even maybe in the first few moments when they return the kick for a touchdown and they're losing 7-0 before you've even cracked open your first beverage. But it was just one of those games where I think it's tough because you're playing a bad team. We knew Cincinnati's biggest weakness is what? Stopping the run? Well, the Ravens ran all over them, and specifically Lamar Jackson ran all over them. In that way, it felt a lot like the Week 11 game last year against Cincinnati, Lamar Jackson's first NFL start. The rushing yardage was almost identical. They rushed for 267 against the Bengals last November. It was 269 on Sunday. So you knew that part was going to play out, or you had an idea that part would play out that way. But I think the reason why you kind of have a shrug your shoulders kind of feel was not sure how much we really learned about this football team. Offensive performance, they ran the ball. They could have finished off a couple more drives. They didn't. They had some crucial penalties that kind of short-circuited them a few times. But and then on the defensive side, they played really well considering they once again did not have a pass rush. And I think if there's one takeaway for me from a big-picture standpoint, that on the more concerning side, that has to be it. When the Bengals had John Jerry playing left tackle, basically down to their fourth string left tackle. I mean, he's a guard, and he was playing left tackle, and yet you look at the final defensive numbers, and the Ravens finished with, they did get 2 sacks. It came kind of later in the game. They did finish with 5 quarterback hits, but not a whole lot of that going on early on. So I think that part of it, you were hoping maybe they'd get 4 or 5 sacks, harass Andy Dalton, get in a position where their pass rush starts to build some confidence, and, well, that didn't really happen. So we'll continue to talk about that. That will continue to be a concern as they get into now the meat of their schedule with 6 of the next 7 against teams 500 or better. So it's definitely going to be a question, definitely going to be a concern. But, hey, they got the win on Sunday, and that's what mattered in the end. And the Ravens, the prevailing message beyond just saying, hey, it's a division game, you don't take it for granted, was they recognized they needed to be better, more efficient, sharper than they were on Sunday, knowing they're not going to get away with that against better competition.
Well, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of this is you look down at the stat sheet and say, well, Lamar Jackson, and they're tweeting out that he's the GOAT and all this stuff, but in weeks where he has to throw for 200 and run for 150, you are kind of asking him to put the S on his chest, right? And, go Superman on you. And against an 0-5 football team, against a bad team, that, Dre Kirkpatrick and this horrible carding episode of him on Sunday as well, I would hope that this is not what you need to do to beat an 0-5 football team. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at it, you look about how sore he's going to be on Tuesday morning, because he took more hits on Sunday than he took the first 5 weeks of the season, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. At the same time, I think you also look at some of the other circumstances. I mean, I think Cincinnati had such problems setting the edge. You look at their run defense numbers going into Week 6, and they were just abysmal. I mean, they were giving up, I think it was in the neighborhood of 167 yards per game on the ground alone. So I think from that standpoint, it lent itself a little bit to the idea that Lamar was going to challenge them, keep the ball at the mesh point quite a bit. John Harbaugh and others talked about the fact that Cincinnati really did everything they could to take away the Ravens' running game between the tackles. And when you look at it, I mean, Mark Ingram's final numbers looked pretty good. But, as far as 4 yards per carry, 52 yards on 13 carries, but he did not have numbers nearly that impressive until the fourth quarter. I mean, that's really when they started to wear them down. They had that roughly a 10-minute drive to really ice that game. But so Cincinnati took away the between-the-tackle stuff, much like Pittsburgh did, much like Arizona did. So when that happens, you're kind of in a position where, Lamar Jackson is going to run more. But I would agree with you. He took a few more hits in this one than you'd like to see. Even in some of his other games this year where he's had higher rushing totals, I think he's done a really good job of avoiding big hits. But he got hit. I mean, there was one time there was a little bit of helmet-to-helmet where you were holding your breath to make sure that he wasn't getting up and being a little dizzy or looking like he wasn't himself.
Yeah, I watched him get hit too much last year, and this year I haven't held my breath much, nor have any of us, right? And he's got that thing he does that I said there was a kid in the playground that could do that in my neighborhood, and which was sort of that stop and then roll his hips back so you're reaching at air. It looks like a cartoon, And he does things nobody's ever seen anybody do, quite frankly, not in 2019. That's like a video game, right? But there is this part of this where you look up at the end of the day and you're like, he ran for what and how much, and we're in a 6-point game against an 0-5 team. That's not so good. I mean, they have guys that are running backs, And by the way, Luke, I want to say this about him. You know where my seats are, right? So I'm in the middle of the end zone in the first row of the upper deck. I look down, and I get the view literally from center field on every play. I'm like a free safety on every defensive play. And on the play when he went around the edge to score the touchdown, the ball was hidden from where I could see it, and I sort of got the magic trick a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he deked me, and I was lined up in the stadium where I could see where the ball was going, and he pops around the edge, and you can't catch him. And to your point, Cincinnati does not set the edge well. Some of these yards he ran were sort of pasture yards, but I do think in games when he's running 19 times, because he had to, literally, in the end, that's what happened. I don't want him to have to run. If he has to run that much to beat New England, okay. You know what I mean? But this was, I hope this isn't a trend. I mean, it was a nice way to win. It's great. We did it all last year this way, more bumper car. I don't want to, I don't want this to be the line again. I don't want any more, hey, let's pat Lamar on the back. He ran for 150 and threw for 200. I hope he doesn't have 15 of these in his career. I'm sure he'll have some, but I hope it's not that many.
Well, I mean, I think it's the context of it. I mean, I mentioned Cincinnati's run defense, and let's also remember, I mean, Marquise Brown was not on the field, and we saw what happened last week in Pittsburgh. From the moment he left the game with the ankle issue, they really bogged down midway through the second quarter until the fourth quarter, and when he came back in, you could see he wasn't running well. You could see he wasn't moving well, and now in hindsight, you wonder if it was You hope it wasn't a situation where he did further damage to the ankle. I mean, he's walking around and everything. It's not as though he's on crutches, but I think we've seen this is a much different, less explosive passing game without Marquise Brown on the field. And, my apologies to the rest of their wide receivers. I mean, Miles Boykin had a nice catch on an RPO slant play, and certainly Mark Andrews at the tight end position gives them big playability. But the rest of their wide receiver group, there's a lot to prove there. So I think there's some of that that was at work as well. But I mean, it comes down to it, and we have ideas of what the quarterback position looks like, what it has been in the past. But we continue to talk about this, and this is a really unique individual. I mean, we talk about the fact that he is good avoiding big hits, or typically is, and he has good body control in that way. I think this year he's been a little more willing to go out of bounds. Maybe not slide as much, but he's been running more on the outside anyway. So there's some of that, but at the same time, we're talking about a quarterback who ran for more yards on Sunday than any other quarterbacks not named Colin Kaepernick or Michael Vick in the history of the NFL in a single game. So this is a really unique talent. And look, yes, he needs to develop as a passer and continue to improve as a passer. And he's made a lot of improvement already. I mean, I remember having a conversation with you not long ago, and I said, look how much better this guy has gotten already.
I feel like they can win with him passing the ball. Like, I don't know that I felt that way this time last year for sure, right?
Sure. So, I mean, but at the same time, it's not linear. I mean, it's not just going to be a natural upticking
Well, because
line,
he has this in his golf bag, right? I mean, on Sunday, Joe Flacco and anyone not named Lamar Jackson, right? Anyone like Joe Flacco that we've ever seen in the league did not have that in his golf bag. And instead, on a day where you have no pass rush and Dalton doesn't completely stink and he's got the best receiver on the field, you look up and you say, all right, well, this could have been a 7-point game. Special teams blows the first play of the game. That if you don't have that in your golf bag, you're grinding this thing out, trying to figure out how to get Mark Ingram to 80 yards and, to get Justin Tucker to kick you a couple field goals so you can win 19-17 or something, right?
Right.
Well, we saw that number for a long time here.
Yeah, no question about it. But, I mean, this is a work in progress. And Marshall Yanda, I think, even said it at one point in his post-game comments that they're still trying to figure out exactly what they're going to be offensively. I mean, it's a very young team, starting with its quarterback, but look at their skill position players, lots of second-year guys, lots of rookies. You don't have too many veterans on that side of the ball. And I think even for and this sounds a little wishy-washy because, at times I've scratched my head at some play calls and things that they've decided to do or didn't do in certain instances. But I think even this coaching staff, I mean, you don't have many quarterbacks that have Lamar Jackson's skill set at the NFL level.
Well, there is no autopilot for this offense, right? Like, It's not throw a screen, what are we going to do on 3rd and long, and how are we going to block it up for Joe? There was a lot of that, and now you do have this in your golf bag, and I'm sure Greg Roman, sleeps well this week saying, hey, at least we had we had a guy that could run for 150 yards, and we had that in our arsenal because we might have been struggling further against Cincinnati than we wanted to.
Sure. And I think part of this is all you do have to bring back to the defense. I mean, I think we haven't seen this. Felt very 2018-like because look at the games that the Ravens have played. Week 1, throw that out. That game was over 5 minutes into the first quarter. But you look at the rest of these games, okay, maybe a little bit in week 2, but Kansas City, they didn't have a lead. And you look at the Cleveland game, they didn't have a lead. Pittsburgh, it was close, and they were trailing late in that one. So they haven't really been able to use that same formula, and I think part of it really has to do with the fact that their defense hasn't been as good, and their defense is searching as well. So I think there's a lot of searching going on for what exactly the identity of this football team is going to be. And I think part of that you do look to with Lamar being a better passer and having some of the weapons that they do have, albeit young ones, is trying to figure out what's going to work best every week. And let's be very clear about this. New England doesn't do the same thing every single week. I mean, everyone talks about Tom Brady, and look, I mean, he's one of the all-time greats, maybe the greatest of all time. He's won all these Super Bowls, but how many times have the Patriots gone out and rushed for 250 yards because they take advantage of a defense that's weak against the run, or it's bombs away one week or the very next week? I mean, they do different things. So I think the Ravens are chasing that, but at the same time, you do need to have your bread and butter. And what's been their bread and butter this year more than anything else? Well, Lamar Jackson, giving them that spark. As I called it on Twitter, when he took off for those 2 long runs on that first drive after the Ravens were down 7-0 right off the bat. The Lamar Jackson experience, it works when you need juice. When you need a play, his legs get you a play 98 times out of 100. I mean, that's just the way it works. So they have that. They need to grow from that. I think they have grown in a number of ways, but it's not a well-oiled machine just yet. And whether that comes next week in Seattle or whether that doesn't come until next year fully, I mean, that remains to be seen. Look, there's a lot of things that have to work out in that regard, a lot of development, a lot of improvement from Lamar Jackson and everyone else on that offense. So I think there's definitely a sense of you see the flashes of this offense perform very well for a quarter and a half. The yardage looks great. They're moving the ball, but you get some penalties or you get one of your young tight ends because they've been doing it so much and it's kind of become this niche, fun kind of thing to do that's gotten some attention, tries to hurdle and he fumbles the ball away. I mean, you have those mistakes and that turns a 500-yard performance, or technically 497 yards of offense when you count the kneel downs at the very end of the game, but a 500-yard day, and only scored 23 points. And that's where you kind of look at that and say, that doesn't really add up. That doesn't really match up. That should have been a game the Ravens scored into the 30s. I don't think there's any question about that. And didn't matter against the winless team, but
they had to play harder and better and smarter at the end because they gave themselves less rope. I mean, they had to go out there and field an onside kick. Yeah. Literally, you hope you never have to do that.
Sure, and I think it's one thing that you have to do that and you still win the game, but it's another thing if you do those things against the Seattle or you do those things against the New England or Kansas City or when Houston comes to town in mid-November. I mean, got some tough games on their schedule coming up here over the next 2 months. I mean, there are going to be very few opportunities to exhale, and really, even over the next 7 games, the one game that you look to from a wins and losses standpoint, at Cincinnati, where, the Bengals played them to a 1-score game on Sunday in Baltimore, and we know the Ravens' history in that rivalry. So if A.J. Green's back and playing by that point, which it sounds like he will be, that's not a game that you just automatically assume they're going to win. So they know they need to play better, and I think there was a recognition of that. But at the same time, hey, they got the job done, division win. You never take that for granted. And they move on, and now it's on to Seattle and some really tough competition coming up here very soon.
We're going to have a lot to talk about in the aftermath of the Browns' loss and going out to Seattle and visiting with lots of people from Seattle this week. Luke will be out in Owings Mills all week long. You can find him, Luke, at WNST.net. I'm participating in Baltimore homecoming the next couple of days here this week, as well as my 51st birthday. Tuesday night, we'll be at Greenmount Station with Bradley Bozeman. We'll be talking about anti-bullying. I'm not accidentally, sort of serendipitously ran into Bradley Bozeman out on the streets of Baltimore on Saturday with his wife. So they're going to be joining us on Tuesday night for some great crab cakes, probably some good cake. My birthday this week, maybe even some ice cream because I've been good. And who's watching? And it's bye week coming up anyway. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and always out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. You can listen to what you want, when you want, all week long. I am going to be loading you up with Baltimore Positive all next week. We have one last piece this week with Mark Weller, and we're doing that at Rye on Wednesday night. And then after that, bye week next week, wall-to-wall, incredible conversation, some of the best conversations that I've had, all Baltimore Positive, all next week. You're going to dig it. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. The Ravens are victorious. They're in first place. It's my birthday. and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.